I don't know what time it is. I can't.
7
see it.
o'clock, close enough. 6
Okay,
o'clock.
6:03. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded per the Open Meeting Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20E.
What, this is the housing trust for, what is
For-
ever today? May 24th.
Okay. We have minutes from the last meeting to approve. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Also, Beth Stores applied to be the 5th member of the committee. I did also talk to Eloise because she had also been intending to join, and she is more than happy to be an advisor and have Beth step into that 5th position. So if anybody has any questions, she'll be here shortly, but she would be an enormous asset. So.
Yeah, she was a neighbor. She's volunteered on a bunch of things in town. Very bright. I think she'd be a great asset too.
Yeah, she's very organized, very fun to work
I probably know her
with.
by
Right.
sight,
Yeah.
but I'm
Okay.
Yeah, that's
failing
fine.
to put the connection with the name.
Right. So I'm going to
Okay.
say.
So we'll be full at that point?
We'll be full at that point.
Okay.
Yep, it's a 5-member committee. So
Oh.
all in favor in recommending that the board approve Beth as the 5th member of our committee?
Sure.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Right, and I think it's already on select board agenda for Monday, so.
excellent. And then, you're right on the agenda. Did anybody have a chance to watch the video? And do you have takeaways from that?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that when the Metro West Housing Collaborative were, talking, they broke it down into kind of like bullet pointed things, which, like a housing trust needs. They discussed the goals, so and last week we kind of started to talk about goals, but really establishing those and, having a really strong trust, money, having land, planning grants, dedicated town staff, local advocacy, sense of partnership and time, and then also local leadership. So kind of seeing all those pieces into play was really good. And then just identifying next steps, I think is kind of where my mind started to go. Is okay, kind of figuring out where are we, what are we doing, and finding out where are we now, and what are our next steps, and just starting to explore some of those questions and not being afraid to be where are we? What are we doing? And I think that's the hard part, is identifying that. So that was one of my takeaways.
Yeah, and I think, for me too, obviously, the education piece seemed to play a huge role. So in that vein, the website, I do have access to the website. I have not had time to actually sit down and put any content on the website. If anybody else has time to do some of that, I'm happy to get you into the website, and you can start sort of filling that out with the purpose and all of those things. So just let me know, and I will hand you over the keys to it. This
Yeah.
is Beth Stores. We
Hi.
already
Hi,
recommended that you be appointed at the next board meeting, so
Cool.
there you go.
I'm Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hi.
I'm
Kate,
Lauren.
we've met.
Laura, Kate.
Lauren. Yeah.
Kate?
Kate.
Yeah, Lauren. That's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That's what minutes are for. I'll be like, okay, I will read them every week. Okay.
Scott, but.
I'm sure.
I
Yeah.
Yeah.
am
Seems
familiar
like
with.
yeah.
I think you know this side of the table.
He's famous.
Well, and she lived nearby, next door for quite a while.
I think the education piece I'm hearing in different places also. The consortium also, that was a bit of a focus too. The video, I just feel like it's dealing on a huge scale with a lot of these projects and the involvement and the layers. I keep coming back to that and trying to say, okay, but we can do it in our way. And with some of their examples and modeling. At the end of the video, they did ask a few small town questions, which was nice, I thought, and helpful. The Hudson example was interesting to me because I could visualize that and relate to that, and that's helpful. I think I may personally go tour some of these places that are being discussed and get a feel for them, because I'm better that way, more boots on the ground than just kind of the cloud in the sky works better for me. So that's my plan.
I mean, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And it's possible we could plan to do something like that together. It would depend on the timing of day, but certainly
Yeah.
if that's
That'd be-
something that you want to follow up on.
Okay. I wasn't sure based on
Well, we would have to.
open law,
Right, we'd
meeting
have to
law.
declare
We'd
it a
have to
public
declare a
meeting.
public meeting.
Okay.
But,
At
But
2
we
o'clock
can-
on a Thursday afternoon
Yeah.
or whatever, whenever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Alrighty.
But
Yeah.
they also, I mean,
And I didn't know if that would interest
yeah.
anyone else, or if
Very
they're-
much.
or if you're familiar with them anyhow.
And certainly if we got someone who was involved in the project there to talk about it, that would be helpful.
yeah, if there's a whatever, I wasn't 100% sure from the video what the structure was, like for any individual development, like who actually were the players. There was a lot of
Sure.
make sure all the players are on the same page. But
Right.
I'm like,
Like who?
can I see an org chart? Can I get some names
Yeah.
and some email addresses? That would be super helpful.
Yeah. And as you're doing these things too, it's possible that we can have individuals come in. One of the things that was helpful, I know, for us when we were on the town admin committee was to have people from these organizations come in and talk about what they do and what they can offer. So those are things, because I think we're very much in the information collecting stage right now. And the other thing I saw come across was, is it RCAP?
Yes.
They actually are a really great organization, and they reside in Worcester, so I would not be surprised if either virtually or here, we could have somebody from RCAP come and talk about us about what they offer and the things that they could help us with from an affordable standpoint.
Well, we also have to remember that starting sort of July 1,
We'll
we
have
might
help.
have staffing for 4 hours a week who could,
Oh.
it would be easier for us to say, you know, can you make a couple calls and arrange a couple things or put it together.
And that's 4 hours a week?
4 hours a week, I believe. 4 hours a month? A week.
Was it? I don't remember what it was.
I'll have to double check that.
Might
We're-
be
we're
a
sure-
month, but
We're,
I
it's
don't-
still,
Either
it's
way,
still, it's
4
still
hours
some-
is
No, that's
4 hours is
significant.
great.
It's some-
Total,
it is sometime.
definitely
I mean,
meeting scheduling.
This is,
That's
Yeah.
what I thought.
They could
Week
set
is
up
like,
right.
you know,
a field
over
trip
the
for
top,
us,
but
or
yeah.
have some of these folks come in and talk, or any of those things.
And it's a little out of time, but out of order, but the interviews were last 2 weeks ago. The candidate they want to make the offer to really is sort of a policy wonk type person, but I mean, just really energetic and wanted, like, you know, asked the question, is there a town where you think I can make a difference in? And I'm like, well, in Berlin, we're just getting started. And so, like, bringing in your stuff, helping us get organized, the fact that you're connected with, you know, 6 other town housing trusts on a regular basis is going to, like, be able to move us along. And we're a town that, you know, from the video, where I think we have some town leadership. There's not like this, no way, no how should we ever put in sort of any affordable housing in this town. We have the planning commission and the select board generally on the same page. And so I think there's a chance where we can make some impact. It's just, again, how, which I always find sort of
The
overwhelming.
how is a
like,
big one. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are, you know, a step ahead because we've already just done a survey on
Mhm.
housing needs and those types of things. So that was also one of the things
Mhm.
they mentioned, and we've already done that. So, you know, we can look at that and
Mhm.
sort of use that, or have our person who's coming in sort of use that as a guide of what Berlin is looking for. But,
Right, and we have the survey from UMass is the data should be coming out like in the
Yeah.
next 3 or 4 weeks.
So
And
the
we'll do a
timing is-
presentation to the select board first, but it will still be, and there are, officially, it was a sort of needs for housing and aging in place, for seniors and aging in place, but there are housing-related questions and a lot of open-ended questions. We get a sense of how many people talked about housing as something they wanted. I think it will give us some data to move forward on.
That survey, a little unfortunate, I took that to be a senior.
Mhm.
I started to answer parts of it, and got hung up with the technical
Yeah.
scanning thing, but I didn't really know it was a general housing thing, so I'm not sure.
I don't think it was a general housing thing. It really was about sort of how to, it is officially a senior thing about aging in place, but when they opened it up because there are people who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who would still like to be here in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it was officially open to anyone over 18. They got several hundred responses, so we should get some decent snapshot. You're right, it's not perfect. There's a lot of people who I think fell in that thought they were either too young or it wasn't quite for them or struggled with some of the technology stuff. But I think I'll have some good data for
Yeah,
us.
we'll clean something from it.
Yeah. Well, any information is helpful, so that's a good thing.
The other thing I took from the video, like what Lauren said, is, has our mission statement been established? They talked about mission statement, SMART goals, and strategies. So,
That's what I wrote down.
cool. I didn't know if that was like already done when the trust was formed, or is that
Yeah.
something we're
I think
determining?
It's kind of a general mission. You can certainly refine it if you want, but I mean the trust. Our purpose is to
preserve
and develop,
create
affordable
low-income
housing
Okay. Or
opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, support that goal.
Okay.
Potentially, and then the logistics. How does this work
Mhm.
with the other organizations that are already in Berlin, even
Mhm.
connected to housing? We don't want to be stepping on people's toes,
Mhm.
but we want to help everybody move forward faster.
Well, we will work closely always, probably with planning and with the housing partnership. But our purpose is also to be nimble.
Mhm.
We are able to spend money in a way that those other organizations are not able to spend it, which is very important in real
$200,000
estate.
limit on what we can do without talking to anybody? Is that?
I don't remember what the limit is.
I don't know if I thought it was
I
lower
think
for
they
that.
did.
That would require town
I read
meeting approval.
So I'm just
Right.
reading from the warrant article.
Yeah, if
It was on
that's
the-
what it's in,
Yeah.
is in the Warren article, then that
Yeah.
would be
Because
what
they-
it is. And
the-
it's,
okay.
I mean, I think it had to be such that you can actually make an offer on a property in a
I
timely manner.
I could have
Right.
messed up a zero, but I don't think it would be as low
But it
as
certainly
20.
could also be where the money comes from. Like if we wanted CPA funds, it still requires the CPA committee,
Got
and
it.
those funds require a town meeting vote. But
Yeah.
there are some small pools of money that I think we have access to that could spend to buy something, or it might not just buy, it might be an incentive to a developer to buy and put some restrictions on what they can do or would do with that property.
That brings up another thing that keeps coming to me, is that I hear so much talk about development and not a lot of talk about actually preservation or what we can do to help people who might be in critical points now or struggling. So that is one of my big goals, especially where, as I understand, some of the money sitting in this fund has been sitting there for quite some time. So I think, at least I feel like some of that money should be specifically geared towards preservation, almost earmarked for it, and then move forward with, whatever comes to be within the future of the trust.
When you say preservation, you mean keeping people in homes that
Mhm.
already exist?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we had mentioned one of the things we had talked about that I think we were all enthusiastic about was things like facilitating the mass save coming into homes and helping to weatherproof them, which helps lower your energy costs and also is just a good thing all around. And maybe we could do some sort of grants or something for that to help people with the resulting cost of following through on those. Once again, I don't think we're at the point where we're ready or know how to do that. That would have to wait until we get an individual to help or talk to
Right.
someone about the process of setting something like that up, and that would, I would think, be a small component
Mhm.
of overall what we would want to do.
No, but regularly reminding us of preservation, because preservation is,
Yeah.
in some respects, cheaper than development.
Yes.
You know, stopping a house from falling so far that it needs to be torn down and replaced is good.
Yeah, it also came up at the Assabet Valley Regional Consortium. That
Mhm.
actually happened to become the theme of that,
Mhm.
unofficial theme of that meeting. Because points were made about other trusts that were up and running for some time. And the question's now becoming, this aging housing stock, we need to maintain it. We're having issues doing that and keeping up with maintenance. And we didn't dig deep into it, so I don't know what those problems exactly are or not, but other towns then chimed in and said, yes, this is realized to be a problem. Maybe renting, there was a question of, actually the question was actually stated, is home ownership a good idea in this scenario versus renting, having rental opportunities instead, where it's managed and overseen that way. So it just, again, it's not just the planning piece. It was further brought round to
You have to move more.
how to connect people.
No, just hit the button. You have to hit the button.
The ability to sustain, preserve, it's more about people than development or planning developments. So, Littleton has a human resources person. Is Victoria? No.
She's not human resource, she does social services and senior council on
Okay.
aging.
I was wondering if she might be a connection in that way.
She
A
might
link.
be with that, especially if we're the seniors trying to stay in housing or seniors to fix up places. She would definitely be someone who would probably either both know people who are in need and the ability to get some word out.
Okay. But a lot of towns struggle with that education piece and the people side of it, not just dealing with the developers and the incentives and building out, but handling what's in the process. So, and I kind of think, my personal opinion is, Berlin has grown quite a bit, even just in terms of managing traffic. So I think we need to digest some things too.
Mhm.
Does there exist an analysis of the local housing stock? Do we know how old it is or in what type of condition it's in?
I was going to ask for a list of what our housing,
Right.
or at least our affordable housing stock is. I'm glad you brought that up.
That would be available.
Yeah.
That's maintained by, didn't Tim say that's maintained by the consortium? Or somebody's
Because
maintaining that for us now.
There's someone maintaining the list of our affordable housing stock for us.
I mean, that's an important point, but
Right.
there's that group of things that
Right.
were not affordable, but like, affordable doesn't apply to something
Right.
that's been in your family for 75 years, but is
Right.
falling down around your ears.
Right.
Absolutely.
Some of it, this is a small enough town, Eloise can probably give us a list of properties that fall into that
Yeah.
space, but I don't know if there's any formal analysis of that
Right.
done by anybody?
I wonder if someone had it, it would probably be the assessor's office that would have it.
Yeah.
Right.
They would certainly know that's
They-
not gonna be, that's gonna be the house plus the land, correct?
They separate it out.
I think
they?
they separate out because,
Okay.
yeah,
Never
because
looked.
they would know what people own
Yeah.
by land, but they'd have a sense of the house because,
Yeah.
the house's condition and the
Is-
number of bedrooms and other stuff has to do with its value and the
Okay.
taxes, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least amenities have to do with it, if you have a pool or don't have a pool or solar or not solar or other stuff like that.
So the SHI, that's the affordable housing list
Mhm.
and what is current.
Mhm.
So like good to look at like that compared to, is
Mhm.
that kind of what you're thinking? Like looking at what is in need and what we currently have and kind of doing a
Mhm.
little bit of that?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because the survey you're referring to, I mean, we haven't, our demographics are older.
Mhm.
And most of them said they wanted to stay in Berlin.
Mhm.
At least that's what I read.
Mhm.
That seemed to be the majority of it. So I'm leaning towards that being a future need.
Mhm.
I know Highland Street.
I don't remember the names of
Yeah.
all these developments these days.
Is senior,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that would satisfy that. I don't even know if it's
Yeah, I think that's
fully
55 plus, but I don't know how
occupied-
much that's
occupied.
affordable. But you also
Yeah.
have Brook Lane, which is 55 plus, and you
Mhm.
have
Yeah, we-
North Brook, which is definitely affordable.
And there's
at
huge
55
waiting
plus.
Anything, I
lists, though.
think
Yeah,
our,
there's-
our senior housing is probably disproportionately high at this point, would
Yeah.
be my guess with we don't have a dearth of senior housing in Berlin,
Right.
at all.
Although we do have waiting lists, because again, as you point out, we have an older population,
Mhm.
people who want to
Yeah.
try to
Mhm.
stay here.
But to have a community, you kind of
Yeah.
want a balanced population to have a healthy community. So you don't want to build all senior housing or all
Right.
young family housing. You want to have a mix of everything to make a healthy community.
I mean, one of the things that the Riverbridge development brought into town is that the 40B stuff we had previous has all been ownership 40B,
Mhm.
where we now have, at least with the apartments, we have rental affordable stuff too, although affordable can
I
still
wouldn't
be
use
questionable.
it, yeah.
I don't remember this being an issue last time we had this meeting.
Most of the time.
Speaking of
Is it dark? No, maybe it's darker because of the rain?
the
Probably.
HUD limits were
Right.
released.
It's set for 5 minutes, that's what the issue is.
Oh,
And I
I
don't.
think it'll go to an hour.
Oh, you press down on it to adjust the time that it's on.
See?
It only gets me 5. Oh,
talk quick.
10.
Yep. Okay, we have time?
Okay.
And I do think it's important that
Thank you.
we probably start with making sure that we're staying within the goal of what an affordable housing trust does.
Right.
I don't even think we're there yet. I think we need to really look and define what the goal of an affordable housing trust is, what is
Mhm.
within our purview, what we can actually do as an affordable housing trust.
Well, there's
Well,
the
yeah.
legal, like, there is what we are allowed to do, but then there's actually what we want to be.
Exactly,
What's the
yes.
gap or the connection we need to be
Mhm.
making?
Yeah.
What are the wheels that can be greased with a little bit of cash and a little bit of time? I think feels
Mhm.
like. I mean, I watched the video. That is the
Yeah.
extent of my knowledge
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
this process.
And I have some information I'll send over that Tim Wheeler gave us just
Yeah.
about
Okay.
sort of the history and where the planning board is and those types of things, so there's more reading.
Does things like, at one moment, Riverbridge big talk about a healthcare facility.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
That's
several
long since gone.
iterations ago, yeah.
But does, for instance, our mission, I mean, if there's a place in town
Mhm.
for people to go, so they can leave their home but still be in Berlin,
Mhm.
does that help loosen up houses and apartments that could stay as affordable housing stock? I don't know if that's,
Mhm.
if that falls into our purview, right? Sort of helping generate all of the options so people can be in the best situation possible for them, and they're not making decisions based on, I want to be here in town and this is the house I have.
Yeah, I think one of just from being in the political sphere a little bit, one of the elements with that is helping people to stay in their homes, so helping them to make the changes to their homes in order to be able to stay there, because making those sorts of changes can also be expensive. It's another one of those things. So it's, like I said, it's that balance of what we would like to do as opposed to staying within what an affordable housing trust
Mhm.
does, or why it was set up.
Yeah, I guess to be curious, like in terms of goals, one thing they said is having like 2 or 3 different goals. You know,
Mhm.
and I think like having an idea of scale, like maybe we want to start, or when thinking about goals, like Kate was saying, is like starting on the smaller side. What are smaller things that we could do with accessible money that we
Mhm.
have? You know, having that be a small goal to work on that we
Mhm.
can start to use as a good example and getting our feet wet, and then
Mhm.
having a bigger picture goal that's like, okay, well, that would need more time, resources, advocacy, like would need a lot more.
I think
Like-
part of starting small
Yeah.
advocates for the trust
Mhm.
and builds a trust with the community as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely that.
Yeah.
It's not, and it educates the community in that process. So I think that is the people part, and that is huge.
Okay.
Bigger than a lot of these developments we're talking about.
Right. And then there also does have to be some sort of development, whatever that looks like. I mean,
Mhm.
because affordable housing, we need to slowly, or from my understanding, increase it slowly, like over time, so that
Mhm.
we're keeping up with the same amount of market rate homes that are being built. We also have to slowly build the inventory of affordable homes, so we can't just focus all, there has to be some sort of development, and what we want that to look like, I think, that's what's in our hands. Is like, so do we want it to be the cottage housing? Do we want it to be something that's more communal housing? Do we want,
Mhm.
Something that can, I don't think we need to go to a big development because we're not at that level and needing that huge amount of chunk. So we can go a different route, whether it's rehabbing a home, but it could be sold to, as a starter home, a first-time home buyer, and getting people in. So I think that,
Duplex situations.
right? Yep,
Mhm.
exactly.
What I did.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that that's for everybody either, but it's
Mhm.
a way.
Mhm.
Yes. Yep. And that's a really viable option.
Mhm.
Like, that would be a great things to have. So something that's scalable, doesn't have to be big development, and
Mhm.
no, I don't think anybody wants that here.
I think that's part of why we're
Mhm.
taking it on,
Yeah.
so that
Right.
we have some say in how developments
Mhm.
go, that we're not dictated by a developer that comes in and goes around all our zoning anyway.
Right.
Right.
And doesn't make
Oh.
any affordable.
Luckily, because we've met
Truly.
our 40B requirements, it's harder to go around our zoning at this point. But,
Right.
which gives us even more leeway to get things done.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, how many, like, if we look at a timeline,
Mhm.
an inventory, how many do we actually need, like, over time? So how,
Right.
like, what
Mhm.
can our trust do? Do we need to add 5 homes within,
Right.
5 years? What is the scalability? What's the actual numbers?
Mhm.
Well, there's a couple things with that. There are certain things built into what the planning board insists upon when you build any sort of development or that sort of
Mhm.
thing. So they mandate that you must have X amount of affordable. So that piece is sort of already there. And I lost my train of thought. There was another thing I had to say. Maybe you.
No, I was just,
But that's when you're altering zoning?
right.
Though?
No, well, right,
no.
if you have to stay within the
Well-
current rules and zoning to do some developments, and the town has, and the problem is, the town has setbacks and other things like that that make developers, the only thing you could really make, quote, money on in this town is, 3 to 5 acres and $1 million house on it. And that's not getting us the laddering of home ownership opportunities. And it
Yeah.
could be one of the things we do is something a developer doesn't have the time to do is how do we write the rules so someone could on an acre of land put a 1,000 square foot house that will only sell for $300,000. They can still make a little bit of money, but it is affordable to the 20-year-olds who are still living at home in town who want to live in the same town as their parents or the town they grew up in, that they can't right now because their choices are apartments or $1 million homes.
Yeah, and that
Um,
could be working with organizations
yeah.
like Habitat for Humanity or those types of things.
Well-
We also lose affordable housing. Right now, we
Right.
have affordable housing that goes off of our list because nobody will buy it under that
Mhm.
purview. So that's another part of what our goal. If
Mm.
you want to talk goals, that is a
Yeah.
goal right there that we need to have, is making sure that the things that are on the affordable list stay on the affordable list.
Yep.
That for me would be goal one, that we do not lose
Mhm.
things that have already been designated affordable.
I'm not familiar with what, can you elaborate on
So,
that? Like, how does it get?
If you're an affordable unit, and you put it up on the market, if no one buys it in 60 days, 90 days, it's one of those two, but let's say 90 days, you
Sure.
can petition to have it, the 40B restriction and the income restrictions of the buyers removed, and then sell it on the open market for whatever it sells for. Now,
So the homeowner would petition, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
And what happens is, because of the rules, they're not allowed, if you're a 40B, to make too much money on it. And so what happens is that the money difference actually comes back, and I think much of it, some of it goes into our pool that we can use to develop more affordable housing, some goes to the state. The state caps the amount of money you can make on selling your 40B unit. The problem is that 40Bs, from our neighborhood's experience, is that, you have to make not more than X amount of money. You have to still have the down payment, which is smaller, but still a down payment. But the
Yeah.
bigger part is you have to have, to get a mortgage, a flawless credit history. And there's very few people who are struggling families who have flawless credit history. And so there's many times where in our neighborhood, we've lost 2 in our neighborhood that we just, after even several months beyond the limit, couldn't find anyone. Well, actually, we found a lot of people interested, but they couldn't make it through the process. And right, yeah, you're probably more familiar with the people who
Oh, yeah.
you're really great. You're really glad you have the income. You might even have the down payment from somewhere, but you didn't pay your student loan payments 4 years ago when you were struggling and trying to decide between food and student loan payments at the time, and now you can't get a house for it. And banks are getting more even conservative now in what they're willing to lend to.
So maybe there is a way that we can support those types
Yeah.
of home buyers,
Mhm.
so that they can actually make it through the process. And I'm not
Right.
sure what that looks like, but
If something
That
is
would be-
built as affordable, as a 40B unit, as an affordable unit, is that our terminology? When we say affordable, do we mean units that are deed restricted under 40B? Is that a perfect overlap?
So to qualify
I don't
as
know.
affordable,
I
to
don't
qualify
know.
in the
Yeah.
list of affordable housing, it has to be sort of a 40B type thing to
Right.
qualify for that list. I think if we were again, a cottage house at 1,000 square feet at 300,000, that wouldn't qualify.
That's a
on the-
different-
That
okay.
wouldn't qualify on the affordable housing formal list, but it would make sort of more laddering of homes available in the town.
Okay.
And would not, if it also would not have the income restrictions on it and the other restrictions. I remember when we were building ours, the affordable units couldn't have air conditioning in them because that's considered a luxury. And so you also makes it so that, if you're poor, you have to sort of, live in a less desirable home than somebody else, which, and they can't make improvements one couldn't add a basement to it, even though there was a basement underneath it. That couldn't be part of it because the state thought that it was a sort of a luxury. And so to me, it felt more punitive.
Well, and it doesn't help you as a developer
Right.
to back down and not, and say nobody gets upper cabinets.
Right.
The
That was the
40B
other-
requires them.
Right.
So,
40B required
of
carpeted stairs.
Carpeted stairs.
Carpeted stairs,
and
even though
things
they
that-
were wood flooring housings, you had to carpet
You
the
had the
stairs
carpeted
because
stairs over,
the
yeah,
40.
it was-
There are some weird 40, and some of the stuff we might do, and we're just a small town, but to point out to some of the places we have connections to and some of our elected officials, some of the rules that make
I really
some of the
like
affordable
that
housing.
as a-
And that costs not much money. It's these are silly things. Maybe you should expect people buying 40Bs will have less than stellar credit history. And what is something that can be done, either a state guarantee pool or we somehow guarantee a portion of the mortgage, some of our money, to look, if they have a problem, if you lose less than X, because it might be willing, and there might be
Yeah.
banks like local banks, they're willing to take more risks in a town where a national bank has, more overhead and more we can't be flexible sort of rules.
yeah, and I know probably just going back to one of the first things that we need to do is we need to look more at what other communities have already done, because rarely do you want to recreate the wheel. And there were how many different communities, and some of them are not large. So all of these other communities have done things, and I'm sure it's not only big developments. We need to start looking at what other communities have done and see if there are things there that appeal where the process is already, you know, formed and those types of things.
And I think that's where staffing is going to
Yeah.
come in handy, is that not only does the person I believe they're hiring have some significant housing experience, at the very least, they're going to be working with 5 or 6 other housing trusts all in central Massachusetts at the same time. And so, like, I believe at meetings like this, like, oh, well, in Shrewsbury, they just
They
did
do
this, you know, or you know, Grafton, or it was weird being on the interviews, and like, and I'm sure you've seen if I was the only volunteer. Like, everyone else is paid,
Yeah.
you know, full-time
We- yeah.
staff for their
and
towns.
they have a full planning
And
team
I-
on
right.
staff and all of these
They
things.
can
that
quote, you know,
we just
some
can't
of the
because
questions
they-
like, well, according to state mass regulation X, you know, what is, you know, like your take to afford to make that? I'm like, okay, I couldn't quote you any mass general law related to housing, so I can say the word 40B though, so, you know.
I know, but is it what we're,
Right.
the same thing we're all talking about? I
Yep.
don't know.
So back to my original
Right.
question
Right.
before I took a total right turn. If something is deed restricted as a 40B property
Yeah.
when it is originally built,
Mm-hmm.
is whether or not it's a rental unit or an owned unit part of that? Is that locked down at that time? Or if a home is built as a 40B unit, it could be converted into a rental 40B unit?
I believe Eloise would know for sure if you want to tackle
I'll
her
have
on
to
the way
see her.
out, but I remember her talking about wanting to potentially make one of the homes that we were going to lose a rental place, but we didn't have a mechanism because the housing partnership cannot touch the money, and thus you have this
Right.
entity that can potentially step in on those types of things and
Right.
make something a rental at least temporarily, or those type, you know.
I think a housing trust type organization can do that. I don't think a developer could do that.
Yeah.
In other words, that like, I was going to mention developer just as an example, but I won't give a name. A developer's not allowed to buy a house and then rent it out as a 40B property if it was built as 40B. And so I think you have to be a sort of,
But we
might be able to.
Yes.
or the town
The
could
town
own it
through the
and
housing
through
partnership,
the housing
right.
partnership.
However,
And-
we
and-
as the town do not want to be landlords.
Right.
Oh,
We
absolutely.
need to be very
Right,
clear
right, right,
about
right.
that.
Not
We do
saying-
not want to be, we
right.
can't even take care of the buildings we have.
Right, right.
Let alone houses, so.
Right, so that we'd have to find, but that there is more mechanism, because the housing trust exists, I think there's more mechanisms where somehow an ownership of the town where there's sort of a rent-to-own opportunity.
Yeah.
Or a temporary rental.
right.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So
Where
it doesn't
it'd be
get lost.
Well, a
Right.
buyer.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Because
So
it takes so much effort to
Or we
make
buy
something
in-
40B.
We buy in
Right.
You
whole
do not
until
want
we
to lose
can
it.
sell
Right.
it to a qualified buyer or any number of.
Right, sometimes when the seller, like a couple of ours had to get sold just because the community needed an owner of it. It couldn't sit empty much longer. And so it got lost, but if someone could buy and afford the carrying cost to hold it for a little bit, it might have found someone. Or that when they went to auction, we could have potentially bid and potentially been the winning bidder and held on to it that way too.
different life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be good, you know, start to think of questions that we can have, like that one.
Yep.
Because they probably have the resources they can find out
Yep.
like that. Can a affordable home be turned into a rental? Is there
Mhm.
any potential for that? And just writing some of these like
Yeah.
things down for this, yeah, for the person who can
Yep.
have the 4 hours.
I think it may have been talking about the development in Hudson. They talked about the apartments being professionally managed.
Mhm.
Does Riverbridge?
Mhm.
I assume they have a professional management.
Riverbridge doesn't own those apartments.
Yeah, they don't own the apartments,
But
but the.
there's a condo association or something?
No, it's, I believe the owner of the building does have a professional management company that manages the building, that is a separate entity.
Right.
I think they're both actually now out-of-town entities.
Because there might be I mean, potentially, if there are already property management companies
Oh, yeah.
working in town, that
Yeah.
seems
Yeah.
like, and if we end up with properties,
Yeah, and I think, isn't that part of what the consortium does? Don't they do part of that? Isn't- Yes, no?
I don't know.
No.
I can find
Okay.
out.
I thought part of the idea of one of these entities was they helped with those types of pieces. Am I
Right.
remembering that correctly?
Sounds right.
Yeah.
But it's all kind of.
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
confused on the names because
Yes.
there are so
Everything
many
says
Well,
letters
housing.
thrown
Tim
around.
threw a
Right.
lot at us at once.
yes.
And we need to sort through, see, this is like just
Yep.
figuring out what everything does and how the moving pieces are and, take one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Even if it's having a representative from each one of those come and say, this is what we do. And then we spend one of our meetings going, oh, so this is what you specifically do. Thank you.
Right,
right.
And asking them questions about
Mhm.
their role and that type of thing. I think those types of things as a building exercise are valuable, even if we spend a half a meeting and they spend a half hour with us. But I think we're fuzzy on the details
Mhm.
here, and we
Mhm.
need to start building that sort of knowledge before we can do any of the other things. So I would like to,
Mhm.
as soon as we can, start scheduling folks to come in and tell us what they do and how they can help and answer
Mhm.
questions if possible. And that may need to wait until our individual comes in, but it's also possible we could reach out to one of them and say, hey, would you be willing to stop in
Mhm.
and talk about this? And what your role is,
I like
rather
that.
than finding out in one quick download
Right.
Yeah.
what 18 different organizations do.
Right, so
Because
we-
obviously none of us actually remembers.
And a lot of them
the
are called
specifics.
Metro West or
Right, they all have
Central
housing in
Mass.
it,
Yeah.
and yes.
yeah. So I'm kind of.
Yeah.
But the consortium, I'm
Right.
gonna try to get the list,
Yep.
the SHI list, and I will ask if they do that
Yeah,
while I'm at
to
it.
see if, whoever do that is willing to come to a
Okay.
meeting, or even if we have to do a virtual meeting for that sort of thing, that's fine too.
Hmm.
Just so
Right.
we start building our knowledge base, so we're experts in
Yep.
as much as we can be, or at least know the people to go ask
Right.
if we have a question, rather than, we know it's one of these people,
Right.
but.
Here's-
I have no problem taking on as a thing to do. I can email Molly, the assessor, just to see what she has for, like, does she have a list of number of 3 bedrooms, number of 4 bedrooms, number of 1 bedrooms in town? What does the assessor's
Yeah.
office have when it comes to what
There
is our
may-
housing stock?
It seems like there may even be a state list or
Right.
something that is available online, but
Yeah.
a ton of information is available online if you know where to find
sure.
it.
I think that SHI list is also on our website, on like the town website. I know Eloise has a copy like in her office.
She does
Yeah.
on the file cabinet.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw it,
Yeah.
but I want a copy of that. But I would like to
Take
see if
your
it's.
cell phone. Take a picture of your cell
Yeah.
phone. That's how you do everything.
We're all gonna run down there.
That
But
was
I
way too
agree.
easy.
I think it.
Have you got it?
So here's another question I had asked Eloise earlier on, because I still think we're early on, but so as a landlord, I've dealt with Section 8,
Mhm.
and that doesn't count.
No, it doesn't.
Why
Why
isn't
not?
there a way that would count?
'Cause
I
it's
know
not-
I know the vouchers move. They can move.
Right.
But we can also lose housing
Right.
in 60 to 90 days. The tenants I've rented to on Section 8 have stayed basically probably until their kids age out and etc. And then there's different things you can do, like accept different levels of rent
Mhm.
because their bedrooms change on the voucher, etc. So that's kind of another one of those catch-22 questions
Well-
that about policy, that why can't that count?
Well, my understanding of the affordable housing legislation is it is so complex, and it was controversial to begin with, so nobody actually wants to go back into it because it's sort of working well enough despite its fundamental issues.
Mhm.
And if you start touching it,
Pick it apart, it will
then things can
But I
break
thought
in
that's
unexpected
kind
ways.
of where we
and-
were, though, about.
Well, we don't do that though. That's legislation. The 40B
Well,
stuff,
no.
that's legislation.
We're
That's
just
not
starting,
our thing.
but we
you
can
can
get there.
certainly
No.
advocate if we find areas of,
Right.
and say, these are areas. And I'm sure there is an organization that is already screaming from the rooftops. I could probably find you one tomorrow. Honestly, I could probably find you 5, and they all start with MA.
Right.
So
Yeah.
but yeah, I know that one of the issues with the affordable housing piece and the 40B is that it was a tough piece of legislation to get passed, and
Right.
when you start touching things, it either breaks other things
Mhm.
or you lose pieces or you.
But I think
and
that's
everybody's
what we're
afraid
doing,
to
though.
touch it.
I mean, we're in it.
Well, I guess the point about, so like, at least in my, like, experience with affordable housing is that affordable housing is very different than low-income housing.
Right.
Vouchers, housing based on income is very different. So I think they're totally, and I guess that would be one question is our trust is strictly affordable versus low income,
Yeah.
and Section 8 vouchers is more low income.
income.
So it's like a totally different, I think
Okay.
it's a totally different sector. So, and I think the towns that issue the vouchers, they own those.
Mhm.
But I think it's totally, I think they're two different systems. That's my,
Even if they're different systems, I don't know how much we end up pushing the boundary of what a housing trust, but when
Right.
it comes to education,
right.
a landlord education about that, because a lot of landlords, Section 8 is this scary thing that they have
Right.
pictures of the 70s and drug lords running in their apartment complexes, and it's not that.
Not usually.
and not usually, right. And
But-
potentially, that helps some stuff in town if there could be an education program around what
Yeah,
Definitely.
That's a great idea.
Well, and if,
Okay,
I mean,
so
if the
Yeah.
latter
Goal 2.
is our,
Yeah.
if the latter is our
We start
concern, then that
educating.
includes
Yeah.
the low-income housing.
Yep. According to the SHI inventory from July 23rd, 2021, which is the latest one online. I thought the 22 one's available, but the 21 at least is online. There were 201 affordable units, 201 units that qualify as affordable. I'll give you the asterisk to that in a little bit. With the town having, according to the 2010 census, 1,183 housing units in town. Now, 40B, the weird way rules work is that all 84 apartments at Riverbridge count towards our subsidized housing inventory, even though there's only a dozen up there that really qualify as that. And for some reason, it says 17 up at Sawyer Hill, and I can't imagine we have 17 affordable units up there. I thought we had like
Not anymore.
10.
We built 17.
Oh, you did build 17? Okay.
Camelot has, it was a full 25%
Okay, okay.
affordable. There were 17,
Yeah.
and then we lost 2, at least. We
Yeah.
lost 2.
Two or three, but
Yeah.
still smaller amounts.
Yeah.
But there's 201 total.
But yeah, Mosaic
and-
had 10, and Camelot had 7.
Right.
But both the ones that were lost were Mosaic, so they're much
Yep.
more even now.
And this is 2001, and since then, the Capes at wherever the South Common development has come into phase. There's a few more that have been added since this number even. Which put us at 17%, by the way, in 2021, when the goal, I thought, of the state was 10%. So,
I believe that's
so
true.
we could
yeah.
build more housing in town and not fall below the 40B, which again puts us in a better spot.
Right.
And that developers can't just come in and pick a random spot in town to get around zoning and other planning.
The other, from the video, takeaway I had was how excited the constituents in Hudson were to double their ratio or counting
Mhm.
of the 40B. They fully met the 40B when they started with their most recent project of the police station, but I guess there was a great
Mm.
force and maybe need behind it that they had very good support in doing that. And they weren't sort of strong-armed into it to meet their minimum. I thought that was cool.
Well, and we might, because the town's met the 10% threshold, but again, the Rockwell counts as 84, but there's not 84 affordable there. We might decide that our informal one is that we want number of units that actually are affordable
We
in
could-
town.
yeah, we could
get
have
to
our own
10%
accounting.
and have our own accounting.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that I've noticed in this is that the 40 units at Northbrook, their affordability officially expires in 2028.
Oh.
They were
I'm
not
sure that's
in
part of
perpetuity?
it. They weren't in perpetuity. They're the oldest ones in town, and so it could be at that point in town. They didn't always have to be. They're the only one on the list that's not in perpetuity.
Can we do anything about that?
That's Northbrook.
But that does give us a few years to figure out why it's not in perpetuity and what it takes to extend it.
Yeah.
At every meeting, we're going to learn new little things about the town that we didn't really know.
Absolutely.
And I also, I mean, I do expect the legislation, there is going to be a push. There are going to be legislative changes of
Mhm.
some sort. We don't know what they are, but the housing crisis is real.
Right.
And it is one of the top priorities of the administration. So I do expect to see some sort of changes and a push to build
Mhm.
or do things to make sure that people can have homes.
So I know people are trying to get away from the suburban sprawl,
Mhm.
but the survey said a lot of people moved here, live here because it's rural.
Mhm.
And I worry about just forgetting suburban sprawl and going to urban sprawl. I mean, we're highly located for that.
Mhm.
So we've had very strict zoning for a very long time here, which is the only way we've stayed rural
Mhm.
where we're located. And I just am a little scared of that in this process.
Right, so how do we set it so you could do an acre and 1,000 square feet without suddenly someone building 600 of them in town?
Yeah, that would be the.
If you give them an acre
Or-
of a parking lot at the mall.
Or-
That would be the
The-
planning board,
the-
that would be, that's the
Right.
zoning
The
question.
mall is looking at turning some of the mall into housing.
I was
I
at
that.
one of
Yeah.
one of the
The-
meetings where we looked at the maps
Yeah.
and
Yeah, the mall at an economic development committee meeting, so it was a public meeting, pointed out that they are exploring the options. They've not like drawn blueprints or anything like that, but what it would take, what it would look like, and in some respects, what are the rules that allow it to happen, and what are rules that would prevent it from happening, and who they'd have to talk to do it. But for them having some housing up there that could, have people who are regularly in the mall, that could make it more attractive for a grocery store or a pharmacy to also be in the place, and to reduce the amount of square footage they just have to rent as a whole, is appealing to them.
Yeah, that's I don't know about
Right.
demographics at large for this, but I do know, like, my dad is almost 80. Many of his friends, which I hang out with a lot, but anyway, you'll learn a lot about me too here. But they're making those changes. They're selling their big homes and they're moving to places like that. My dad's girlfriend in Situate moved to a development a townhouse that was mixed use. And where the mall's located, that would be a very accessible, that sounds like a very sensible win-win, because the malls are being
Yeah.
crushed and made into Amazon
Warehouses.
shipping
Yeah.
warehouses
want
now anyway, so I wonder, how that helps Berlin, because we'll lose some of that revenue from the mall if it goes under too. If it could be converted to housing, it makes sense to me, but that's exactly what's happening. Is the senior population is where I was going with it. Seems to be a huge fan of that. I think younger, our age, are, still very obsessed with our cars and travel and commuting, and that might change, but I think it's a different page. But I think so it may work well, that aspect of it, with our aging Berlin population and what they need.
And if your goal is a place where you have access to trees, when half of the couple works in Worcester and the other half works in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
and you just need a place to be for a couple years until you get your life organized,
Mm-hmm.
an apartment at the mall,
Mhm.
you know, where you're not driving through 20 miles of a curvy back road to get, you know,
Yeah.
to a
I
house
think
with the
the
yard full of
Rockwell has
ticks.
kind of
You know,
turned into
that's-
that a little bit too.
you know, where you
Yeah,
don't have to do
yeah.
the maintenance,
Right?
right? You know,
Yeah.
that
And they've
seems,
stayed full.
seems very attractive.
According to them.
Yeah. And
All right.
they're not.
All right, it's 7 o'clock?
Yeah, yep, so I would like to talk about agenda for next time.
No, I will not be able to make the June meeting. I'll be out of
Okay.
town.
When is it?
June.
It's the 4th.
Yep.
Wednesday.
Fourth Wednesday. So I think it'd be
The-
like the 27th or something
One,
like
two,
that.
the 22nd, June,
Fourth Wednesday?
The fourth Wednesday is the 28th of June.
Right, because the month starts on a Thursday.
Yeah. Okay.
It does.
Um,
I will actually be here.
Okay.
I can make it.
I'm about to leave for France, but I will be
Sweet.
here that night.
Okay. So what would we like to do for the next meeting? Do we want to try to get somebody to visit? Is that, or do we want to hold off on that until we have somebody to schedule people?
I guess who, yeah, we would have to decide, like, who would we
Yeah.
want to come visit?
I mean, because we
Do you-
can probably easily reach out to RCAP, or you could talk to the consortium and see if a representative from there would like to come talk to us. But I think we could spin in circles for a long time speculating.
Right.
So
We
I
should
think
start more information,
it's
yep.
time to start bringing experts in.
Yeah. Agreed.
Also, still wondering what kind of funds we're talking about exist
I had
and,
gotten-
and where they have come from.
I had gotten part of them from June. The problem is they're in multiple different places, which
Right.
was another thing I wanted to, we may want to talk about how to get all of that into one line item sort of thing. Because right now, there's stuff over here from mitigation, there's stuff from CPA, there's stuff from,
Right.
it's kind of a mishmash of all over the place. So probably
Okay.
that's a conversation to have with June about how, if possible, those
Right.
types of things. I have to think it's probably possible to put it all under one umbrella, and she's gonna
Yeah.
hate us for that, but,
Right.
yeah.
That's the 7 o'clock reminder.
I think it probably has
Yeah.
to come under one umbrella.
Well, and I think it is both money we control and money we have access to are both two different piles. Like CPA money, we don't control, but we could potentially put together a project that we recommend to the CPA. And then there's funds that, again, we could just make a vote and make it happen too. I think just key dates to keep in mind is November 1st, I think, is the deadline to get in capital requests to CPA and to capital planning for next fiscal year. And November is both 6 years away and tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'm wondering too.
there will be a fall town meeting. We have not set a date. And I don't think we're anywhere near having anything that might be ready for a fall town meeting, but just know there will be one in likely September, October timeframe if we had something that needed a vote. But
Yeah, and do we know if CPA funds, if you could vote at town meeting to simply transfer them to the trust?
yes, you can transfer them to the trust, but the CPA would have to, and the town would have to be in favor of us just having money we could do. Usually they're thinking it's usually going to be tied to a project, like we like to, and it could be a pool of money in a project that's not I's dotted, T's crossed, but like,
Yeah, I
we
mean, we
want to do a
could
matching grant for home, we want to do a matching grant program for home repairs for people who have lower
Yeah.
incomes, and we're still working on some of the details, but
Or we would like
give
to
us
be in
$50,000 for that.
in a position if there's a real estate, similar to
Yep.
what conservation sometimes does, tends to be a
The-
certain
Yeah,
level
I
of
can tell you
urgency to some of that.
the conservation asking for money ahead of time, not having a property, has always gone down to big defeat at
Yeah.
capital planning. I can't imagine
Okay.
it would get it, just because it feels like a slush fund that you don't know if it's a good deal or the right property, and so there's people who are skeptical
Yeah,
of those as a whole.
Yeah, I'm sure we would have to
Yeah.
frame it in some way. It's just, I think you do run into, and the argument from conservation is sometimes accurate, that sometimes you need to be able to react quickly.
Right.
Mm.
Right. Like
Yeah.
in the case of the home that we lost, we wouldn't have been able to wait for 6
Yeah.
months to
Right.
move on something like that.
What is if we have something that we want their money for, they have to recommend it to town meeting in order for us to access
Yeah.
it? So it really is
I mean,
it is
that's
not speedy at all.
Yeah. So that's something, and that may also, once again, we can look at how other communities do that
Right.
or approach that.
Figuring out a
But
way to-
I think,
yeah.
once again, if part of the goal of a affordable housing trust is to be nimble, it is not nimble to have all of our funds tied up and have to wait for town meeting.
All of the funds are, or?
Well, there are some funds, but I mean, once again, you would be in a position where would you then rely on those funds, spend them, and they're gone, and then you, once again, are only CPA funds? Because these are funds from specific, whether it's
Yeah.
mitigation that
Yep.
are limited,
Mhm.
or, yeah.
Yeah.
So there has to be some sort of discussion about keeping the entity.
Right.
I mean, June gets us started, but at some point I envision sort of like a Google Doc that lists money and then like what are some of the restrictions.
Yeah.
We can vote on it, but it's restricted to just 40Bs. We can vote on it and it's only for preservation. It has to be for seniors. It can only be for education. I don't know what the restrictions are in the various pools of money, and just a date and about how much is in it, so we get a sense of, could we spend $5,000 on a flyer that we mail to every home in town about mass energy save and encouraging people to call up for energy stuff, or, like we could write something up and put it in the Powder Horn News, Powder House.
House, yes.
Powder Horn was the neighborhood I did organizing in. Powder House News, to get out to some of the seniors, or a flyer we have twice a year. The tax bills go out and
Yes.
the census goes out.
Yeah.
So there's
Right,
like
something with a mailing.
three
Those are
town-wide
excellent.
mailings,
Yeah.
and there's always a flyer or two about
Yes.
something in those. And if we targeted, something for, the census always goes like in January or February, and so if we thought that by then our goal was to have something about us and some of the resources that are out there that goes into that, could be something we could
I like
pull
that.
off.
The mass save thing in
That's-
particular seems potentially like low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm a
in
big-
terms of
Yeah.
like something we don't have to
I-
learn a lot
Right.
about
Oh,
the
sure.
outside world
I'm a
to
big
make that
fan of them
happen.
since they're
That's
writing me
just a
some
link.
checks to do projects that will make my house more energy efficient and lower my bills, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So, agenda,
They helped me get rid of propane, which I would love,
You will
I like
follow
not
up
having
with-
propane. Oops, gosh.
Good
We're
consortium.
talking
We
about-
gotta go.
Yes.
that will be our first,
Yep,
Sure.
and if you can't do that, I'll follow up with RCAP.
Mm-hmm.
yep.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll try to have a visitor next time.
Once
And
we. I
mail
won't be
me
at
if
the-
there are any other
right.
agenda
I'll
items.
mail the group, if they hire someone and they have an email address or contact, they start July 1, if we at least know what it is, and in early July can say, hey, come to Berlin at some point. Because I think we should try to interact with them prior to a July meeting, which would be the end of July.
Yeah,
So I'll-
yeah.
We could
I'll-
even, I mean, they might be willing to come in on the 22nd just to say hi
Yeah.
too.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
And then the website.
Does anybody want to play with that, or you want to, I probably can't do it this weekend, it would be the following weekend where I could play with it again. But if somebody
Yeah, I'm
else
not
wants
gonna
to
get to
get
it
in
the
there.
next week.
Definitely
I'm leaving
not.
for a conference on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I
Got
gotta
Foster.
write my
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, so.
We
no-
can, I mean, we can hold off
Yeah.
for a little
Okay.
while.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
We don't have a ton to put on there, too.
yeah, exactly.
And particularly, we don't have once we have our mission statement and we
Yeah.
can state these are our
Well,
three things,
right now,
right?
it needs the structure
It
of
does need
this
the
is
structure,
what we
yeah.
do, this
we are
is who's
currently
on the
blank.
committee.
Well,
or
we
whatever.
don't, maybe it'll be another week before I'm approved anyway, so,
Yeah,
5th, yeah, Monday.
Yeah.
Monday.
yeah, and it's
Um,
not gonna take long once I just
Right.
need the time
Yeah.
to sit down and do it, and Tim will help me too, because he's already done the other
Yeah.
one. I might be able to con him into
Yeah.
doing it.
yeah.
Cookies in it for you or whatever.
Yep.
All right, so
Great.
if there's nothing else, let's adjourn
Perfect.
at
7:05.
7:05.
7, but yeah.